Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Insider webcast and podcast. I'm Jeff Bergerson, joined, as always, by my partner, Zachary Turcotte. We're with FantasyGolfInsider.com, your #1 resource for everything fantasy golf, including your home for DFS golf. Thank you for joining us this week, and thank you all for being loyal members of FGI. We truly appreciate that, and we will never forget that. This webcast is also available in podcast form on iTunes and Stitcher. If you'd do us a couple of favors, if you'd give us a 5-star review, write something nice about us, we'd really appreciate it. It helps our search engine optimization quite a bit, gives us good rankings and everything. And also, since this is a webcast, you can just go down and click that subscribe button under the webcast. And in the future, when we do webcasts, and we're going to be doing several in a row now, pretty much. Yep. A lot coming up with the FedEx Cup playoffs, the PGA Championship. You can check us out as soon as the webcast comes out. Zachary, we have a lot to talk about this week. An outstanding WGC event. We talk a lot about last week's RBC Canadian. But first, we have a laundry list of people who absolutely cleaned up. FGI members were dominating last week.
It's a lot of fun, yeah.
It is fun getting all those tweets and emails to know that we're helping some people out. So without further ado, Fantasy Wiz DFS said he won $1,000 for the second time in the last 3 weeks. Dave Schmock had another profitable week. Our boy More Husker is his DK screen name. Took third in the Country Club event. Won $15,000 on DraftKings.
Cheers to you, sir.
Also, by the way, was kind and generous enough to send us a little gift so we could buy liquor for the webcast for many months now. So thank you, buddy. We really appreciate that. Kevin Cabara took second in the Club Pro for $25,000 and won a Thunderdome ticket. That's about $5,000, $5,300. Won a Weekend Warrior ticket, and won a Fantasy Golf World Championship qualifier ticket. So nice. Have yourself a week, my friend. That is awesome. Chris at Wheels59 tripled his money, and we continue to absolutely annihilate weekend golf. So I was checking out the standings in the $8 and the 20-person max, and it was just all FGI logos up and down. We heard from Lane Ortenberger, sent us a tweet with a screenshot and said that he had his first 5-figure day playing DFS, which is outstanding.
Almost all of it on the weekend, too. Yeah.
Almost all was on the weekend, yep. He tied for first in that big $8 event, so he chopped that up. Brent Savage took fourth in that same $8 GPP for $2,500. I think we had just about everybody in the top 10 was FGI guys. Daniel Tutai cashed in a bunch of GPPs, including winning the $1,500 Eagle event. Rick Triolo only played 2 lineups in weekend golf, but they took 16th and 2nd in the $25,000 mulligan on DK. And I know I missed some of you, and I apologize for that. It's just tough to gather all of the names and stuff like that. So if I missed you, I'm sorry, but congratulations to all of you who had success last week. It's why we do this, pretty much. So good job, everybody. Let's keep up the good work rolling into the PGA Championship and then the FedEx Cup playoffs. Zachary, let's talk a little bit about the RBC Canadian. Johnny Vegas, defending champ, wins in a playoff over your guy, Charlie Hoffman.
Yeah, who I actually owned in my 333 lineup. And
how did that feel?
He came in second, so that was reasonable. It exceeded expectations. Yes. I mean, going into Sunday with the lead, yes, you would like to see him close and win it, but second place, that's not a terrible result whenever you play Charlie Hoffman. So, yeah, that said, I was pleased. Both of us had really strong core groups overall. You know, I told people in cash games, like, let's just not mess around. Let's just go straight value here.
Straight chalk, yeah.
Let's do Campbell, let's do Reevy, let's do Ollie, let's do Tway. Those are your first 4.
Yep.
You go ahead and pick the other 2. And if they screwed up the other 2, there's not much I can do on that. So I think pretty much across the board, everybody should have cleaned out in cash. I had straight wins across the board in cash, so that worked out really well. Obviously, it was a fairly chalky week. Vegas was a huge surprise because I think it would have been nice to be able to bite off just a few shares, but his form had been...
Yeah, he had missed 5 consecutive cuts coming into the event, and thus he was only owned by 3% of the field.
Yeah, like 1.8 in the 333. But yeah, and I mean, he had been really good all the way up until about the Masters. And then from the Masters on...
It's been bad.
Horrible. Yeah, I mean, really, really terrible. So it was... He's a guy who you think about a guy like that at a course like this, because he's a big driver off the tee. I mean, he hit the one on 18 before the playoff, like 390 yards.
Him and Dustin were like in the same spot. Woodland was right there too.
Almost got to the water on the tee shot for 400 yards. I mean, it was huge. So that's the kind of guy you're thinking about. Just a big hitter, open fairways there. You know, he doesn't have to drop a ton of putts, but those par fives are basically like par fours. So the big hitters are killing it all weekend long. So he's a guy you normally would have thought of, but the form was just too bad for me to get on board. So it was a little disappointing that he was the one who snuck through and did it, because I think a lot of the guys that we had up there were real close. We just couldn't quite elevate to get the win on those.
It was another chalk players having success week, though. So a lot of teams had 6 of 6 through the cut.
Oh, yeah.
So it didn't necessarily mean that you even cashed in some GPPs just getting 6 through. You probably did, but you know, maybe not with Reeve and Campbell and Tway and all those guys in the 7K range making it through.
Yeah, so it was a little bit tricky, and we still get a lot of questions on that from week to week about, you know, which guys do I play, which guys do I fade, because you still have to play some chalky guys. Some people get so crazy and so wrapped up in, well, this player is going to be chalk or that player is going to be chalk, and so they just try to avoid all ownership completely, and that's usually just not going to work out very well. I mean, we've seen the winning teams. It's been adjusted upwards. You're looking typically in like the 90 to 100% range for much of this year. It's changed a lot, and I mean, even this last weekend, you know, you needed the Charlie Hoffmans out there, the Tony Finau's out there. I mean, if you went and you dove down and you grabbed, you know, Johnny Vegas, that could have been a good way to offset
some other ones. Well, Seamus was in my car. He did really well.
Nick Watney, somebody was up there. So I mean, there's ways to do it, but you don't want to completely just dodge all ownership, because that wouldn't have worked out all.
Well, especially last week, it was very difficult because our options up top were very limited, especially when Snedeker pulled out. There just weren't a lot of good options.
Yeah, you had the top 3 guys. You knew all 3 of them were going to make the cut. I mean, Kuchar was a little.
You didn't think that late on Friday afternoon.
Thursday he had the dizzy spells.
Yes,
and,
I know. Almost collapsed.
So he's kind of down, and I'm thinking if there's ever a time when Kuchar was going to withdraw, this would be it. But he fought through it, and then Friday afternoon.
About noon on Friday, he was at even par.
Yeah, he was at even par. He hit an eagle on 13. That spurred the run back, and you know, he was decent for the rest of the weekend. So
then he went birdie to make the cut.
It was pretty electric the way that he finished. Didn't do much over the weekend.
Didn't do much, no.
But he hung in there. He didn't sink any of your cash teams if you decided to go up and take that route, though. So, yeah, I mean, overall, it was a really good week for FGI. If you didn't hit something big, it was more than likely you just had one guy out of position was going to kill you. You know, if you ended up playing, you know, like Danny Lee instead of like Gary Woodland or something, that probably dropped you out of contention for some of the contests. So there was a real razor thin margin for error when so many guys that are chalky end up making it through the cut.
I enjoyed the event overall. I normally don't like these real low-scoring festivals where everyone's birdieing everything, and you go into a hole, you know a guy is going to birdie. It's kind of lame. Yeah. But I liked the event overall. I can't tell you why. The coverage was atrocious. It keeps getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday it was like 2 shots commercial.
It was comical at the end there.
And I was just thinking, is Tony Finau even on the course?
Yeah, you didn't even see him.
Yeah, finished in 4th place.
Or Woodland, for the most part, wasn't even pictured until the last few.
Like, oh, here's Tony Finau sinking an eagle on 18 to finish tied for 4th.
Yep.
He hasn't been around. We haven't seen anything out of him.
You got your CEO interview for about 10 minutes and then a boatload of commercials.
Yeah, and they really, really stuffed it in. I was just thinking to myself, wait, they're more than usual? I mean, I know we complain a lot because that's kind of what we do.
Oh, yeah.
There were certainly filled up their share of ads yesterday. So, yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. But it's a little bit sad, too. I enjoyed seeing the course I enjoy when they play at Glen Abbey each year. It's always exciting. It seems like it's always an exciting finish. I vividly remember Jason Day nailing the eagle putt 2 years ago with Bubba standing out there looking at his second shot there, and then him needing the eagle to tie it and not being able to get that done. But yeah, it's kind of sad. It has been a fun course the last 3 years in a row now that they've played there. So a little bit of a change coming up, but.
It's can I just add one more complaint as long as we're fielding complaint cards?
Air it out.
I love Arnold Palmer. And I know it's sacrilegious to say this, but can we kind of turn the page on this? I feel so bad for Sam Saunders. I mean, he cannot do an interview or be talked about without having his grandfather's name.
Death of his grandfather.
Oh, you're doing really well in this tournament. What would your grandfather say? Sure. Just like, come on, let's just... And does every tournament need to have this celebratory thing for Arnold Palmer? I mean, can we just do this at some courses, not every single week? I don't know. I'm just kind of like, oh, this is too much. It's too much. We got to do this for a freaking year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little over, I think it's been over 10 months now. Yeah, it's been almost 11 months.
Yeah, and we're still...
So we're right at the end. We're at the tail end. So you're almost done.
I don't know. People are going to say, you don't like Arnold Palmer. That's not true.
You just did it.
Not true.
You just killed the whole show.
There goes our good feedback.
Just inspired a lot of it. Just inspired a lot of thumbs down. Oh,
I'm sorry. Maybe someone agrees with me, but we'll get a thumbs up from Sam Saunders, I'll tell you that. So let's turn the page to this week's event, the WGC Bridgestone in Akron, Ohio, Firestone Country Club. The South Course opened in like 1929, so it's been around a while. We got tournament history here, which is nice. The course is 7,400 yards. It's a par 70. As with WGC events, we have a small field, about 70 guys, no cut event, so we need to plan accordingly. In my column this week, I looked back a couple of years at 70-person field events and what the aggregate ownership is for those events to see if it differed from full field events. So be sure to check out the results in my column. It's kind of interesting what I've found, and it's a different ownership structure, it's different aggregate ownership, and it's different roster composition.
It's a completely different game.
It totally is.
It definitely, it's going to throw some people off because we haven't had one since, well, it's been a while since we've had a no cut. So they always kind of
Mexico, right?
Yeah, and that would have been, what, 4 or 5 months?
4 or 5 months.
So it's a ways back. They come around a couple times a year. It'll be good to get ready for them because there's going to be several of them coming down the stretch from here on in. We've got this one, and then we'll have the 2 during the FedEx Cup.
Sure.
So get ready for it. Be starting to think about how you're going to change up your strategy a little bit more.
A lot of people say scale back your bankroll, which you can if you want. If you don't feel absolutely comfortable, you can always scale it back. I always feel like I do really well in these events, and I can't explain why.
I'm hit and miss. I'm very hit and miss. And then I think, too, in cash games, there's a discussion. I don't think there's a lot of merit in really being out there in the cash games in weeks like this.
Yeah.
The way we make our money is just capitalizing on other people's mistakes throughout the season. So we're just playing solid, steady play. Like the 4 guys that I wrote in the core last week. Play these 4 guys, put 2 other guys in at the top, and your team is going to be set for the week. You're going to be good to go. You can't do that as much this week because even if somebody goes down and dives after a guy who is kind of marginal overall, it isn't necessarily going to hurt them if they have a bad first couple of rounds. They're going to get through they're going to get through all 4 rounds. Some of those guys will have decent turnarounds on Saturday and Sunday, so it's definitely not going to hurt those guys. Plus, this tends to be a lower scoring event. Mm-hmm. So last week, the winning score minus 21. The winning score here can be like minus. I think, what did Lowry won that like with like -7 or something?
Yeah, I think so.
And it can be -10 maybe.
That's
somewhere.
What I would guess.
I think for like if it's somebody like DJ who really gets rolling,
and if there's some wind too.
Sure. So overall, points get really condensed as well. So it's much harder for people to go about making mistakes. Now, last year was a lot of fun. In that we had a couple of scoundrels get out there on the course. Yep. And Daniel Berger took 1 tee shot. And
that was one of the biggest dick moves I think I've seen in a while.
Pretty low class, pretty unprofessional. And then Brooks hurt his ankle somewhere around, and he limped off.
He could barely get through it, right?
He withdrew, so That's the other thing too. With
he was
with
seen
these
playing
events,
soccer like 2 hours
that's
later.
usually so that killed me here a year ago
Yeah.
because I owned them both on different teams and a couple on the same team. And then the other, and then the last time too, Mexico, Henrik Stenson.
Right.
You see him driving off in the cart. So I do get a little nervous, and that is why I will take my exposure down this week because guys are guaranteed a payday.
They are.
$50,000 just for showing up here. And if there's anything at all even marginally wrong with them,
or they get down early.
Yeah. Next weekend is the PGA Championship.
Right.
So this is a good event, but next week is a major.
Yep.
So if they aren't feeling it after the first round, it's happened so many times just within the last couple of years. Danny Lee has done it to us in no-cut fields here. Same type of deal. So, yeah, I kind of do advocate taking your bankroll exposure down. Because if a guy withdraws, it's a killer. It is an absolute killer.
Yep.
So even if he's 20, 30% owned, that roster is going to sink.
Yep.
So...
Or maybe just play the majority GPPs.
Play the majority,
which is what I do most weeks anyway. But maybe that might be a strategy for you.
Play more GPPs, and for me, I'll take my exposure down just a little bit.
Key stats this week: strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained putting, par 4 scoring, greens and regulation making an appearance this week from the Fantasy Golf Metrics guys. Scrambling and driving distance. The glaring omission this week is birdies or better percentage.
And that kind of gets back to what we just mentioned, the scoring being down.
Right.
They're a little bit lower. And when I asked them about that today, they said, well, both birdie or better and birdie or worse were rose in the bottle, but we thought they thought enough of par 4 scoring to utilize that instead. Par 4 scoring had a 20% weighting, which also unusual. So it was definitely a little bit different, but it's been a trickier sort of course for these guys over the last few years. So I can understand things being shaken up a little bit.
The beauty of our model, however, is you can adjust it however you want, which is what I'll be doing. I'm going to factor in some birdies or better. I just think it's that important. I don't care if it's a tough course. I'll shave down a couple of the others. I might shave down par 4 scoring just so I can get 10, 15% on birdies or better.
Get some scores in the lineup, right?
Yep, absolutely. Sure. So let's take a look at the pricing, Zachary, and you'll notice that it's, I think, a little bit tighter. Because I started building lineups just to see what roster composition can be. You won't be stacking 2 of the big top tier studs this week.
No, unless you really want to dig down.
Well, if you want to be in that low 6K range.
Yeah, there's nobody you can really trust down there at the bottom where it just jumps off and you think,
especially 4 of them. Yeah, if you want to mix in one, maybe 2 in GPPs just to be contrarian, but if you're depending on 4 of those guys in the 6K range, pack a lunch.
It's going to be tough going. Well, up at the top, though, even up at the top, I'm still pretty indecisive this week in terms of where I'm going to start my rosters, because I think you could conceivably start with any of the top 5 here.
Yeah,
and not go wrong. I mean, Spieth coming in with 2 straight wins.
Yeah.
He's playing fantastic golf right now. He's not the type to really downshift and take a week off. Although he did miss the cut before the Masters, I'll say that. But typically, once he gets into the zone, he tends to stay pretty focused. Were you encouraged at all by what you saw out of DJ this weekend, or did it leave you kind of mixed?
I'm a little bit mixed. I wrote on the weekend piece on Friday. I watched a lot of DJ shots over Thursday and Friday. I thought the weather delay really messed with him. He was cruising early on, but it slowed him down. The game isn't clicking on all cylinders right now, but you see how dominant the guy is. It's just a stray tee shot where he gets in trouble. The one hole, I don't remember what it was, but he hit it in the crick, an ill-advised shot. He should have just taken his medicine.
It's kind of like the DJ of 2-3 years back, where because over the last year, he'd have one bad hole, boom, he'd put it behind him, he'd rally back, but in previous years, one bad hole can turn into 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
And then he's just out of it.
Yeah. I think one of these weeks, in the coming weeks, and it could be this week, we're just going to see him put it all together, and I think he wins. I really do. There's just he can get so locked in, and I think he's really close. But then Spieth is already locked in. Rory, we saw glimpses of it at the Open.
Back,
Eventually, it's going to click for Rory too, like we've seen 100 times before this.
Yeah, for sure.
So the argument can be made for just about everyone. Then you got Brooks
and Ricky
and Matsuyama too.
Right.
I mean, Ricky I think he's got 3 straight top 10s in this event. Plays well here. He's been playing well. Matsuyama's been playing well. I don't know what the ownership is going to look like.
Yeah, it's the first week. It's the first week where I can't really point up to the top and say, oh, definitely here, definitely here.
Right.
I think Ricky will probably be popular because he's always popular. I think if people are looking to shave off a little bit, save a little bit of salary, I think Ricky could be popular. Brooks, normally I would say would be a great buy, but I mean has now up near that 11,000 range. I mean, it gets really difficult if you want to lead in with him on your roster. Now you're really having to hope that he definitely is a contender this week, which it wouldn't shock me if he was 30th, or it wouldn't shock me if he was second this week.
That's the tough part.
There's really that wide of a range for Brooks in terms of what he can play. So those 5 up top, I'm really going to have to dig in because I think all of them are definitely contenders there for me.
Are there any guys down in the next tier that you can maybe, shave off that you're not interested in? Jason Day, I just don't. I don't think from what I've seen I can.
Is he just going to finish up this season just kind of
tough to tell?
He's not going to roar back at all because we saw some signs of life out of him a little bit.
Yeah.
Here and there at the Open. He's certainly going to be a guy who's under-owned.
Oh, for sure.
Up there. But he's getting 4 rounds. Obviously, we're not worried about him missing the cut anymore. We know he can score. I mean, man, like a year ago, he would have been 12,000. Now he's 9,400 this week.
Yep.
I don't know if I can completely cut him out. I think this week, I don't know that I will end up playing Matt Kuchar up in the 9,000s.
Right.
We had such a great break. When the field was really stacked over at the Open Championship, he's 7,200.
Right.
It's still really just as stacked up at the top this week.
Yep.
And now he's up in the 9,000 range, which is uncharacteristic for Kuchar in these stronger field events. Usually for majors, we see him in the low 8s or in the 7s.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I'll pay up for him. Plus, he's coming off of, he looked okay last week, but he's played a lot now in a row.
Could be fatigued.
Traveled traveled 2 overseas, played 2 events over there, traveled back to Canada, played in RBC, and was kind of running ragged. Now he's coming to the WGC this week. He's got to be a little bit tired, I think, a little worn down. So he might be, and he's not normally, he did well here last year, but he's not normally a guy who dominates this type of event. So I may end up staying away from Cooch up at the top.
A few guys in the middle I like a lot that I think have a lot of upside. Well, Brendan Grace at 8,600, Tommy Fleetwood at 8,400. I think he's a good GPP this week.
There's no cut to worry about anymore, which is great. I mean, and we saw down in Mexico, he started slow and then roared back the last 3 days. That's kind of his MO. He
tends to do that.
And all these events, just start real slow and then come screaming back in the 3rd round and finish strong.
Is this a buying opportunity for Justin Thomas at 8,200?
I think so. It's interesting this weekend that Daniel Berger, I always kind of track where those 2 guys are priced because my feeling is they're virtually identical, almost identical as players. They have very similar skill sets, same age. So we've been watching them come up together over the last few years. Berger's actually $100 more than Thomas, and I can't recall the last time.
And Thomas has had him by a lot the last
usually he's way higher priced than Berger. I mean, just looking back at the Open champion, Berger's what, 6,700, and Thomas is I think 82, somewhere in that range.
And I think a lot of attention is going to be off Thomas this week
because he's missed 3 straight cuts. So but he hasn't been just terrible. It's been kind of like one really rough round in the mix in some of these events. And and this week there's none of that miscut type of pressure leaning over to him.
I like it.
I think so. I think this is a good time to buy him. He's a guy who can definitely get scoring. So I'm not always a huge Thomas fan because I know his temperament is not that strong. Mentally, I think he's still a little bit weak. But I think 8,200 is a nice price for him.
Yeah. Dropping down a little bit, Rafa Cabrera Bello at 7,900 comes in pretty hot. A couple really nice events, his last 2, clearly with the win, and his outcome at the Open was very good. Alex Noren at 8,100.
There's a guy I think you have to play this week.
I think this range is just loaded with guys, which is why I really don't like stacking 2 of the top guys because then you're just not in this range at all. If you want to go up top, then you can get 2 or 3 guys in that 8K range
Right.
And not sacrifice too much. But if you stack them up top, you're just avoiding this range, and I think there's too much talent and value in that range.
Is Louis going to bounce back this week?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
He looks so bad at the Open.
I know.
I don't know if there was speculation that he was injured or not feeling well. He's going to be very low owned this week.
He will be.
He'd been excellent all the way up until that point. I think there's a little opportunity. I don't think I won't be overweight on him, but I think his ownership is going to plummet this week. It's going to be probably it's a no-cut field, smaller field. It might be around like 10%.
10, that's what I would say. Yep.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
I think that's interesting. I think there's not very many guys. I haven't looked at the odds versus pricing worksheet yet, and that'll be posted here soon. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a lot of guys, or there's not going to be any that are just eye-popping value.
Not this week.
This week. The only guy that I really noticed was probably Bernd Wiesberger down at 7,000. Mm-hmm. If there's going to be a guy in this lower range who is going to be on the chalkier side this week, I could see Wiesberger being that guy at 7,000. I mean, he hasn't, not that it matters, but he hasn't missed a cut all season long. He's been dominant over in Europe for the most part. Not real great
not at the Open. But he never is.
Yeah, he never is. He never is. And that's something that you have to kind of realize when you go into an event like that. Is just not his style of course. But this should be a better course for him.
I think so. The grinder overall type course, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a good spot for him there. And now I think that 7,000 for me this week is kind of the Mendoza line.
It kind of is. There's a couple of guys. Thomas Peters at 7,300.
That's a good value.
A lot of upside, I think.
He'll be one of the guys that shows up in the odds versus pricing chart. And
again, no cut event. You'd like that with this guy.
With a guy like Peters who can go up and down and up and down, and he's gonna get some birdie streaks going while he's out there.
Below him, I mean, there's a few guys. You could have a little Duffner, a little Kisner to mix in. Maybe Chappell even looks pretty good. In that range.
7,500.
Yeah, 7,500.
Schwartzel at 72, I think, is a pretty good play this week. So there's definitely some guys in that range.
The tough part is the 6K range.
Yeah, the 6K range is really kind
not
of
good. It's like the Masters 6K range. It's like you don't want to touch many of these guys.
Where you dip down and you just think, ooh, I have good reason to stay away from him. Ooh, I mean, I guess I could see Kyle Stanley hanging around and being pretty good. I mean, just excellent ball striker, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Not an exceptional putter overall, but pretty good in every other of the areas. As greens and regulation are going to be important. Par 4 scoring is going to be important. Definitely a guy in play. He lacks course experience here. I mean, we both mentioned that Jimmy Walker is a big name. He'll probably be be popular at 65, 100.
Yeah, probably.
Which is different for him because usually he's priced in a way where he gets overlooked. But I don't think 6,500 will be a spot where he gets.
Do you trust Jimmy Walker?
I mean, I don't know if you have to get a lot out of him for value at that range. So if you want to start up at the top and you want to start your team with Ricky and Hideki or something along those lines.
When you say that, it depends on what contest you're playing, though. Because if you're playing in the massive GPPs, you're going to need to have him finish in the top 20 for sure. To win the GPPs, no matter what he's priced at. So he just feels like an anchor to me. I don't know. Whether it's the Lyme disease, he's just not popping. Every time I've seen him lately.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if it is the disease or what.
Then you will have no idea. No, because it's such a long.
And he's not going to come out and say,
right? I
feel like crap.
He'll say that he's feeling better. That's what he'll say. But better, does that mean you're good, or does it mean you're better than garbage?
Right.
I mean, so it gets real tough down there. But yeah, there weren't a lot of names that I look at and feel.
Maybe Brendan Steele down there. I could take some shares of in GPPs.
Yeah, and people probably after seeing him at the Open, be ready to kind of dive off there a little bit too. So definitely some work to do for me as far as deciding on who I want down towards the bottom.
Sure. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for us breaking down the salaries. Be sure to check out our columns, My Core, Zachary's Daily Spin. Check out Perry's Weekend Preview, which is up bright and early this week.
Shout out to Statboy.
Yeah.
Again, 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's gone 15 for 15 with his picks on FanDuel.
That's bananas.
I don't think people realize, if you get that once every couple years of being perfect in 15 out of 15, that's a big deal. Doing it 2 out of 3 weeks in a row is amazing. And hopefully you guys caught it. We put it out there for folks for free. Give them a free preview of it
We will not make that mistake again.
No, we had several members say, please do not make that free ever again for anybody. That one time was plenty. That was enough. So.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We're listening. You can catch us on Twitter at Fantasy Golfers. Zachary does his Periscope on Wednesday nights with any of your last-minute lineup questions. I'll send out my update email Wednesday night with any last-minute withdrawals or weather. No one's withdrawing before tee time, because at worst case they'll take one tee shot. And
Snedeker actually did the honorable thing.
He did. You know, I like that. I like Snedeker. I always have. It's more than I can say of Daniel Berger going and collecting his paycheck. I mean, give me a break. But any questions for us on anything, email us info@fantasygolfinsider.com. As I said before, we're going to do a bunch of webcasts coming up in the next month or so with the FedEx Cup playoffs and the PGA Championship. So you're going to see our ugly mugs quite often. But when we don't do webcasts, we still do podcasts. So you can always check us out iTunes, Stitcher, or on the website. We post it as well. So best of luck this week for the WGC Bridgestone, and we will see you next week.
Good luck.